Wait for the little thing. All right, we are rolling. Welcome to the virtual brown bag of March 4th of 2021. We are, as usual, recording our calls. So as we encourage folks to share, make sure that whatever you share, you just don't cause any kind of trouble with your clients or employers. We don't have time to edit things out later, but do not have that, prevent you from sharing. It's just, there are certain things you shouldn't be sharing. What is the virtual brown bag? This is a place where we get together. We share all sorts of tips and tricks, experiences, frustrations, the things that we've learned the hard way. Hopefully by sharing with others, we can both internalize better the lessons as well as help somebody else out. So that's win-win in our book here. Not supposed to be a one-way conversation. Let's just have an actual conversation. It's not your typical user group type of presentation. Logistics, we have these meetings every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. Make sure, to share the link with other folks who might be able to benefit from these calls, coworkers, friends, and family, and everybody else. Here are some topics we've covered over the years, and it's not a comprehensive list. It's just a way to indicate, hey, we've been all over the map. We talk some real technical stuff. We talk some like soft skills type of things, and whatever folks are going through that they may feel like sharing, we just open up and share it here. We have the virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting here, as well as link to videos of the previous meetings with a little blurb to let you know what we've talked in those meetings if you want to check it out. And other than that, let's roll. So what have you guys been up to? Hey, George, you're on mute, man. I can see you talking, but I cannot hear you.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
It's weird. Skype, like if the icon is lit up on Skype, that means it's active, but like in a lot of other stuff, that means it's inactive. Yeah, I don't know. It throws me off every time. Yeah, I've been onboarding like a lot at a company. Yeah, so yeah, I haven't had a lot of time to get into stuff. The one thing I could maybe demo would be kind of how I'm using Roam just for note taking during this workflow and how it's like generating really nice notes. But I'll defer to anyone else first because I would set this up anyway just to demo it.
Right. So, yep, all folks on the call, just feel free to chime in if there's anything that maybe over the last week or a couple of weeks that you've learned the hard way, or maybe some challenges that you're going through that's like, how the heck do I get this thing done, or what have you. Just try it out. If not, George and I are always happy to just bleed your ears off with whatever we're going through.
Yeah.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, I can say a issue or something unclear situation in my job, so that I think it would be great if I can get some help from you guys. Well, actually, my main point of question is to understand a correct mindset on what's the most important or what's the best option for that specific situation. Well, definitely all the solution will totally depend on the situation, people, budget, and all the rest of the things. But just as a person that's working on the development for almost, I think, 6 years, 5 years, most of them was not so sufficient or it's really good, but at least I put those years to working on this industry. So the real situation is that I'm recently joining a company, and when I working on their code base, I found that it's really messy. And this is they're treating like this, that each front-end developer that joined the team, they totally isolated with the specific modules and ask them to implement. So if anything broke on a specific part, they need to find that specific developers, because no other one are familiar with that specific part. And also, these type of development and management cause some problems. Lack of speed. We don't have patterns, so that if someone is about to be changed or want to be replaced, for example, to move out of the company or to move to another team, no one is really accepting his responsibilities, because his code base is the way that he did the code is really ugly, really different, and really somehow ununderstandable. So I know in some situation we said that, okay, the spaghetti code is okay, just try to reach the market, just try to reach the deadline and the rest of the thing. But totally in general, the thing that I believe is that following a pattern, following a code base, or trying to use reusable code will definitely save many times, many efforts, many budgets, because one problem can, I mean, for for a bug in a code base, you need to hire one developer to fix it, and you need to pay to that developer. So as a result, I believe if we have a cleaner, not clean, at least if we follow a basics in our development, like following a code pattern, or trying to reuse our code components beside of creating new ones, it definitely help the team, the company to move faster, better, and more sufficient. So the question here is that this idea is really correct, and if it's correct, I have another question.
Were you added to the team in a senior lead capacity, or as another developer on the team?
Actually, I'm joining them as a senior developer, and there are another person that carrying the head leading in the front end, but somehow in the current situation, the head of the front end trying to follow my approaches, or at least my idea.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that is that I've had times where I was specifically brought on to be that senior lead person, and then in other cases I was brought on to join a team, and I encountered similar messes. When I was the person that came on as the lead, or to take over as the lead, I basically, knowing that they wouldn't quickly adapt, I started introducing some things to make the code more reusable. I started documenting some of the ways to refactor the code and make it more optimal. And sometimes I did walkthroughs showing some of the things that I was bringing to the table in terms of code or standards, to give them the opportunity to ask any questions, to push back if they wanted to try to get everybody on the same page. So there's been a mixture. Sometimes I brought in the standards and say, hey, this is what we're going to do going forward. Other times when I was just another developer on the team who may not have necessarily been the lead, I would introduce what I knew were the best practices. And then when people started seeing the efficiency that I was bringing to the table, or certain things that could be reusable, I would try to kind of like slip them in gradually and say, hey, I recommend we use this approach. And then as they get accustomed to it, then they start adapting to using those reusable things. So like I said, depending upon the role, I might come in directly and say, hey, here's our standard going forward, and we need to refactor what's there to match or adhere to the standard. Other times I introduced it in gradually, and then as people saw this as a good approach, I showed them how to use that in the environment going forward. So I don't know if that helps you, but that's just a couple experiences I've had.
Yeah, patience, definitely. Patience is key.
So I have a few things to say about this. Um, I've run into this many times, just for various reasons. Um, One of the things that I think is important is to try to understand why the code base got to the way it is. It's not always the same. Uh, Sometimes people don't know any better. That's less true now than it was 20 years ago. Um, 20 years ago, there were lots of development teams that just really didn't know, and that's, I think, less common these days. Um, but generally, what it means is that there's some incentive within the organization. The system works the way it does to produce that outcome, right? And if you want to change things, you really need to figure out, okay, is it time pressure? Is it just, people, uh, code tends to sort of decay to the lowest common denominator. So are there a few people who are just resistant to doing things in a reasonable way, and because of that, nobody else tries? I would just suggest, try to pay attention to the people dynamics within the organization, because we think everything is a technical problem, and most of the time it turns out it's a people problem. And if you want to change that, you got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I love everything you guys said this far. I'm so on board with all of that. At Improving, we just started a couple of book clubs. And one of the books that we're going over is a soft skills type of book called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. So I know that like some of the clients I work with, they have some policies where contractors cannot be team leads. Just one of their policies. So that's the kind of case where it's like, well, I cannot lead, right? But how can I still uh, have some sort of influence on how the team is doing things? And it's what you guys all described. It's like, well, if I do know how to clean up some code, I have the skills, I have the time, and I can get it done within the sprint, I'll do it, and then I'll share that with the team, because that's a lesson that I've learned. And when I give my talk on code reviews, it's one of the things that I mentioned. It's like when I look at the code, I I want to believe that whoever wrote the code, it could have been myself, did the best based on the time they were given for the task, the current knowledge that they had, either the technical knowledge or the knowledge of the business, and the quality of the requirements that they were giving. Because give, a badass developer, a real bad user story, bad requirements, that person is not going to come up with something great, because it's like, well, if the requirements are not good, there's no good work coming out of it. So I try to put those three into equation. So as I'm doing code reviews, for example, I'm looking at it, it's like, okay, it doesn't look great, but that's okay. How much time do I have now? Am I able to make it a little bit better? If I am, I'll make the changes, and then I'll share with the team. Hey guys, I saw this, and then I went this route. Is it is it okay with everybody? And I gauge their reactions, because sometimes it's like, say I'm reviewing some C# code and it looks nasty, and I know some ways to make it better. I'll do it. I'll present that to the team. At times, the team will go like, oh yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Other times it's like, how does that actually work? So that gives me the chance to see, okay, maybe the team didn't write it like that to begin with because they're not familiar with those things. And so I take that as an opportunity to coach, like Brian was saying, just coach people. Um, and then when people ask me, oh, so when you give these, talks on clean code and stuff like that, do you always write clean code? I say, heck no, because again, if at the time that I'm implementing something, I don't know that tech stack, for example, like when I got started with React over 2 years ago, I knew zero React. I didn't know what clean code in React would look like. So, but I had the user story and I had some time. to implement that, I would implement it, but then I would ask, one of the guys more experienced in React and say, this works, it passes the test. Please tell me how I can make it better. I'm pretty sure I don't like the way it looks, but I do not know any better. I don't know how to make it any better. So just building this culture, and it's like the guys were saying, you have to be patient. You cannot just walk in and say, dudes, this all look, I mean, so awful. I cannot touch it. I feel dirty. I have to go back home and take a nice shower. You cannot approach it from that angle because again, we don't know. Maybe they did do their best with what they had at the time, knowledge, and requirements. But we don't know. So let's work with what we know right now.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny to say that because I'm literally dealing with a lot of what everybody's been sharing. They brought me in as a senior on a project, and I'm working on the 6th or 7th attempt to implement this software application. Yes, like literally the 6th or 7th attempt. I think he said he failed 6 times, but maybe it was 5. But and the thing is, they had a lot of pressure because without me naming the specific project, I'll just say it's in the COVID testing space. So you got people running all over the place, budgets, decisions. We tried this and that failed. Now we tried that, and so much pressure. And some of the final decisions that even relate to what we're working on right now, looking at the code base, it's just like you said. I want to take 12 showers a day. It's like ugly. It's poorly formed. Some things have spaghetti code. There's no separation in a lot of places between, like an MVC pattern. A lot of stuff is all interspersed together. And I even see places where there's full SQL statements hard coded instead of being abstracted, with some ORM or something like that. So instead of me just banging my head against the wall or screaming, and I did tell them, like, hey, there's some major issues here, and I see some performance issues on the horizon. About 6 months later, we're now starting to talk about implementing some new projects, and some of the things that they wanted in the current project, they've decided, like, okay, we'll separate these features out, make this a separate project because this technology is not suitable. But I pretty much had to do a lot of these things. There was already project managers in place, but because I came in and I did work and I started implementing things and I started refactoring code or introducing classes that made everybody else's life easier, I'm essentially pretty much the project manager now, not officially, but in a lot of cases, I'm up at that level where I'm doing requirements gathering. All facets of the project. I'm meeting with the client all the time to discuss what's the next phase. So because I didn't come in there just throwing blows and I'm the man and that sort of thing, I just kind of eased my way in. They started trusting me, so now they come to me even in terms of future projects, even though I'm just a tech lead.
Right.
So it is kind of like a merging yourself in and making your footprint known gradually, and then they start coming to you. Other thing too is that bringing in the reusable classes and things that I do that other people didn't have, I'm knocking my work out quicker and helping them. So they're like, why does this guy keep getting his stuff done? Oh, he's reusing this component. Oh, well, wait a minute. I can introduce that and into my code and call a method, and that'll save 20, 100 lines of code. Yeah, let me grab it the next time I do it. So I'm sneaking the stuff in gradually.
Yeah. And you're leading through, it's like on this book that I mentioned, the author talks about, you're leading through influence, not through authority.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. What was the book again?
How to Lead When You're Not in Charge.
Ah, thank you.
You bet.
I had to add that to the list.
Yep.
Yeah, also I would appreciate if you comment it down on the group so that I can search to see if I can find it or not.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's thank you all for your answer. So here is my second question. Let's imagine.
Before you go to there,
Wait a minute, you're starting to scare me.
Thing I want to bring up. Because you specifically asked about reusable code, and you specifically asked, like, okay, is that a good thing? Is that something we should be going for? And I think, like Brian said, in general, the answer is yes. But let's also cover the dark side of reusable code, right? Because there is risk there, right? The thing is that when you create reusable code as opposed to a bunch of, say, code that kind of does the same thing that's going in different places, that is going to be coupling. So first and foremost, it creates an opportunity for bugs that might have affected just one area to now sneak into two areas. Right. Secondly, it creates an opportunity, if people are not disciplined, to become a dumping ground. So you can have things like the God class anti-pattern, where there's just one big class or module with like a billion functions that all do different things, and there's no real cohesion there, and that doesn't make things simpler, right? It just builds a different form of dependency tree. Actually, before you didn't have a dependency tree, so you're swapping out one problem, which is speed and maintainability, for another, which is dependency management and maintainability. And then also just within the function can become a dumping ground. So for example, right now I sat down yesterday to try to pick through, it's about 150 lines of Python code, a function that happens. And it's very easy to see, like, I don't even need to jump into the git blame to see that so many people have touched this code. It has no real thematic cohesion. It's, here's a bunch of stuff that needs to happen at this time, but then it's just a dumping ground about what happens. And there's certain bits of the code where I'm looking at them like, okay, there's like a null reference exception possible here. There's an error, right, where this might be null. And if that happens, there's no logic around and there's nothing that happens there. But then there's other stuff that is, again, checking that if the same value isn't null down below, and then doing logic based off that. So you take that risk, and you have to be on a team which can be disciplined about it. And you just need to think about that risk. I would say not every team, every bit of code that is the same across two different things should be abstracted, right? So just it's something to think about, right? There's another dimension to it.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, George. Yesterday I had a chat with a coworker, and that came up too, because he was concerned that we had like 3 endpoints, that the implementation is like 90% similar, so maybe we should have just one endpoint and we pass in a flag to know. I said, yeah, even though the implementation is very similar, the intent that triggers that is vastly different. So if we just have one endpoint and we make it reusable and all that, we are losing the intent, which is more important. From like when we work from the outside in, we don't want to lose the intent of the user invoking those actions. So it changes the dynamic there. So great point.
Yeah, thank you so much. So in the case that you mentioned, of course, using reusable or using a pattern could have great side and also could have dark side. So yeah, it's totally dependent on the situation and how you can organize it within a team or within your special situation. So my second question is about, let's imagine you face a really messy code base. The project is almost finished. It's released to the production. And now you're about to refactor it. By refactor, I mean not specifically try to come to each component, change it, but try to just somehow organize, at the beginning, organize your component structure. Let's imagine for a React-based project. You define your component. All of your components are under the component directory. You don't have any pattern. You don't have any structure for your project base. And now it's time to refactor. And you thought that, okay, maybe atomic design pattern would be correct, would be good. But in the beginning, you just want to separate out your components so that you can organize your project directory. And on the second phase, you're about to refactor and follow the exact approach of atomic design pattern. So here is the question. Should I move to directly refactor it from the top to the bottom, or I should try to refactor by a small component? Let's imagine I have a product detail page. In a product detail page, we have the title, we have description, we have image gallery, we have order button, and the rest of the things. So let's imagine I refactor the gallery, the image gallery, that when I see the product image and when user click on it, it pop up a modal and show me all the images. So for refactoring, you think it would be better to first refactor these image components and try to replace it in all of the pages, or it's better to directly jump to the product detail page and refactor whole the page from top to bottom? Of course, it depends on the situation, but generally, I want to know your own opinion.
I think it depends on the team.
So I don't know if we lost George or what, but I'll pick up on what he's saying.
Okay.
Refactoring on a component basis. Can you was I dropping out?
You dropped for like 10 seconds.
We lost you for a second.
Okay. So what I was going to say, it can be easier to introduce refactored components on a component basis, because let's say there's some annoying bit of functionality there. Just writing the component and then telling everyone on that team, you know, that annoying thing that that everyone's dealing with, I've solved it. Here's how you do it. Great. Everyone loves you. You get uptake. That's that leading by influence. At the same time, if you are in a position more where you're seeing people that want patterns more and you have good ideas of patterns, well, you're not going to be able to demonstrate those as effectively as refactoring a page, creating a structure for it, and be like, well, this is how we should do stuff, right? From the sound of it, it sounds like in your situation, doing components first would be a better approach, because you still need to get buy-in from the team that this is the sort of thing they should be going and doing it all. And it sounds like if you create a good, even if you create a really good architecture for a page or an area and show it to everyone, they would say, that's great, but we don't know how to do that everywhere else. So you do your thing, but we don't know how to do that everywhere else, and we're not doing that. So just from what you've said right now, it sounds like componentizing things as much as possible is the way to go.
So I'll give you my opinion, which I think it's a little different than George's, but so the way I approach this stuff is, first of all, the first change you make needs to be easily reversible. So whatever that means in your situation, you need to be able to deliver something that people can see what you did. And if you get a bunch of pushback and you need to, you can just, reverse it right back. And that's not just, I'm not talking just about your source control. I'm really talking about, okay, if you make this change and people go forward with it, and then somehow it causes an issue, how much unraveling are you going to have to do? So it's going to depend on, in this aspect, it's going to depend on how integrated is that piece that you're changing with everything else in the system. So that's something I really try to think about when I'm doing something like this, is like, if this is fairly independent, if this is a page that lives more or less by itself, that's safer than, oh, I'm going to change the back end piece that everybody uses to, hit the order system or whatever, right? You just have to use your judgment about things like that. And the other thing too is I always look for the things that are clear wins. Like, look at the developers around you. What do you think they'll be able to, you know, uh, understand most easily and bring the most benefit? I mean, this is all about choosing, how much is this going to cost me, both in terms of development time and reputational issues. Just think about, where can you get the easy win? And I would always go for the easy win first. Something that you think you can sell to everybody and people can see the benefit of it. And that's probably not very specific for your situation, but that's the way I always approach this sort of thing is, okay, who's suffering the most pain? Does anybody else in your group understand that this is a problem? Because if they do, then you have a potential ally in your efforts.
Well, thank you, John. That leads me to my third question. John somehow expressed something really amazing that I really want to ask you. The thing is that when you join a team, let me explain it this way, so probably it would be a bit weird. I'm working for almost 4 years in my country companies, and at the end I found that the most important thing is not the quality, not the improvement, not the speed, not the being bug free. The most important is that the leaders or the CEO or the CTO see that you come to the office at the 8 a.m. in the morning and leave the office in the 6 p.m. afternoon. So they do not care about the improvement, structure, anything. They thought that they are gods and they are ruling some creatures, and they expect you to just code without thinking. If you found a new way that really helps the team to reduce their times, reduce their bugs, reduce their problems, and of course improve their performance, they definitely try to not accept that, because they always think a change would lead them to many new problems. Why? Because I believe they do not have a great understanding of how to managing or how to leading a group of people or a project. So the first important factor in improving, in growing a team, is to understand to them that, hey, this is a real benefit. It has the benefit. It has a much better situation for us if we do. So how can I somehow teach or mentor? I cannot say mentor. How can I expand this knowledge through a team? Because I didn't have any experience directly communicating with a multi-language team, and I don't know how to treat that situation.
So that's tough. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat this one. Yes, it's true that basically nobody in the world, as far as I can tell, understands how to manage software development. At least nobody who's doing it understands it, which is kind of depressing in a way. Also, I think it's okay. You have to understand what matters to people. Like COOs generally are never going to care about their software development process or anything else. Sometimes they do, but that's usually because they read it in some magazine that they're supposed to care. Like, what matters to somebody? Well, to some extent that depends on the individual person, but to a large extent it depends on the role. If you're a software developer, so you work in a place where the only thing people care about is you show up, at the right time in the morning and you go home at the right time in the evening. I worked in a lot of places like that. The truth is, most software developers realize that if they're going to be there during that time, they want to make that time as pleasant as possible, right? And people actually like doing their job and they want to do a good job. I mean, it's almost always true. You'll occasionally run into people who aren't like that, but mostly it's true. So you have to sell people on the things that matter to them. Like if you tried to sell me on, Claudio's Evernote stuff where it's all his note taking, that works great for him. That's not my personality. And it's never going to work, right? So if you're in that situation where management has no clue about software development, and that's more common than not. Actually had lunch with a friend yesterday and mentioned that I think it's been 30 years since I worked for somebody who actually knew what I did. Like, really what I do. And that's even working for people who are software developers. It's just, you just have to accept the fact that you're going to have to, direct yourself. There's very little value you can get out of management, in my opinion. This is my personal opinion. It does not represent the opinion of my employers. Let me make that clear. You just have to figure out what the right way to go is and do the best you can to move things in that direction. It will be always easier if you can get other people to pull in the same direction. I've worked on way too many teams where everybody had a good idea, but they were all different and we were all pulling in different directions. And I tell people all the time, if I'm in that situation, I stop doing what I want to do and try to figure out, well, who's doing something that I can tolerate, right? Who's trying to push us in a direction that's better than where we are? And I'll go work with that person and get on their side because it doesn't do any good. I might be the smartest person in the room, usually not, but if I am, it doesn't matter if I can't get other people to go the same direction. And it's amazing how people are much easier to to let them persuade themselves. I've come to believe that nobody can be taught anything. People have to want to learn. And when people want to learn, you can help them learn. And, that's much easier than trying to teach somebody something. I don't know if that was helpful, but that's kind of where I am on that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Okay.
I mean, so I think to some degree, and I agree with all that. I think part of talking to CEOs and convincing them and, getting them, well, I mean, that's what you want. You want to convince them to do something is, at that point becomes sales, and sales, you need to understand how they're thinking about things, which is in terms of problems that they're dealing with. And then you need to sell the thing that you're trying to do as in terms of how will it affect the things that they're dealing with. Because I totally understand them them being afraid of change, because they have this business they built with lots of effort. And I mean, mind you, every company I've worked at, the CEO was the person that put in the most effort, right? They sometimes they've been hired on, stuff like that. But if this is the person that grew the company, I mean, hats off to them. They've been through a lot. And they have something that worked. And they have a bunch of stuff they're concerned about it, but then you're pushing changes, why? That is a risk. So you've got to sell it to them in terms of, here's all these other stuff that you're dealing with. Here's how it lowers that risk, either that, or here's that giant reward that you get if you do this. And yes, it's a risk, but it's a risk you should take because look at the potential payoff. And you've really got to learn to talk about it in those terms.
So much love that you brought that up. Actually, this morning I was giving a talk to one of our internal groups here, and I specifically brought up, I'm going to drop it in the chat, the book To Sell is Human, which is essentially, we're all sellers. I mean, oh no, but I write code. You are a seller in the sense that you are trying to move people towards an idea of how you want to implement something or how you want to make changes to some refactoring. If you're, talking to business folks about, whatever it is and the reason why they should go with technology A over B, you're selling, right? There's something that you're selling there. And this book is really good. It has brought to my attention certain techniques that I can deliberately use to get better at moving people, right? In essentially, like, for example, meeting them where they are, right? Understanding what's of value to them, and then you speak to them as opposed to having them understand why certain things are important to you, right? It may be important to you, but not to them. So you have to go meet them where they are. I'm loving this discussion. Thanks for asking the question, man.
Pleasure.
Good deal.
Thank you so much. I try my best to follow the result of this session to my situation, and will definitely provide you the feedback to see how situation goes with my current problems.
Yes, please do. Definitely look forward to hearing, how are things progressing for you? What have you tried? What was the kind of feedback that you got, or what kind of pushback did you get? And, let's make it as an ongoing thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Take notes. Write down exactly what you're going to try and write down how it worked out.
Yes.
Like, write it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean try to write it down, all the steps, all the moves that I'm going to apply with my current situation, and then try to estimate if that step is really efficient or not.
Sure. Because you could at least use that to frame your thoughts in case of, should I try that again? Should I try more of it? Did that not work at all? I mean, otherwise you're kind of relying on kind of your memory and instincts, and having that written down gives you a record to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that feedback. Yeah, like write down the information that you got here today. Try to outline, what are you going to try it, come back and write down, how did it go? It did work. Why do you think it worked? Or it didn't work. Okay, so I found a way that didn't work. This is why it didn't work. Should I try a variant of this, or should I take a 180-degree turn and try something else? But have that, because eventually you're going to find something that works, and that may be like 6 months down the road, and you've tried a bunch of stuff. So it's good to be able to look back and say, okay, these are all the things that I tried. These are all the reasons why it didn't work, right? So that you can use that moving forward. And hopefully, when somebody runs into your path that has the same kind of problem, you are not going to lose touch of the things that you've tried. Because once you find something that works for you, you're going to start taking that for granted, and you're going to forget your path to getting there, right? And then you end up losing opportunities to helping out others who are going through the things that you've gone through when you didn't know certain things. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Which may be a good segue
So
into
definitely,
George's thing,
Yeah,
note taking.
sure. Okay. Let's do this. Yeah, let me show you. So I created, yeah. As I've been onboarding at work, I've been using Roam a lot. And I've talked about Roam before. And again, just to summarize, am I sharing my screen yet? No.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Skype.
Yeah. So Roam itself is not Emacs bound. It is a concept, and it's a piece of software called Roam Research. In fact, I'll go ahead and make an entry for it right now. Oh, I did already. Okay. So it's a type of software. You can go online and get it. It does cost like a monthly price, so it's not super cheap. But it is. There are other takes on it. Org Roam is it implemented inside of Emacs? That is free. There are other free versions of it as well. The core idea of it is to make it as easy as possible to create a note, take a note, and link it to other notes, and that's all you get. So let me show you. I started taking notes on this conversation about 40 minutes ago. Here's what I've got so far. Here is the big list of notes that I've got so far. Look at that. Look at all that stuff. Now, when I jump to a note, this is the other thing. With part of the linking, you get this back buffer. Here's everywhere that I link to it from. Okay. I want to see here's what everything John talked about kind of and that I took notes on. Oh, okay, what about bad code? Okay, well, here's where we talked about bad code, right? It becomes, so I'm onboarding at a company right now. I'm building up this massive database about what exactly is going on. You want to see how all of this is linked? Well, they're all linked, so sure. I mean, you could do that here. So let's browse URL of this buffer. Look at that. Here's how this entire conversation has linked up.
That's pretty cool.
Right?
wow.
Right? So again, I'm a sucker for these super lightweight tools and the visualizations, and woo, this is fun.
This is nifty. I like it.
Yeah. In fact, I don't have it set up properly, but if I had it set up properly, I don't know if you can see in the corner, it says org protocol. So like I would be able to click this and go directly to that node, right? So I could have like a big heads up display of my entire database on like another screen, like auto refreshing, and then just be able to navigate by that, right? And again, this is 40 minutes of conversation, 50 minutes now.
Yeah.
So I am finding this to be, first of all, just super enjoyable, just to be able to hop around like that and be able to take notes and, be able to say, all right, so I'm going to demo org graph. Okay, so here's org graph. It's connected to org Roam because it's a feature of that. And it's something that you do in Emacs, right? But what I'm doing is create a graph of everything in your database. And again, this is not, when I'm showing this is not connected to like my actual note-taking one. I started this in a temp directory like just now. I'll say, because this is org mode, I could even say wire up org protocol to, and I can make it a to-do and to make it clickable, right? And then when I view my list of to-dos, it'll show up there. Yeah. So yeah, it's really. Let me actually. All right. Notifications. Oh right, where are we? There, sleep notifications. So yeah, super nifty. I've been doing this listening again, just for onboarding and being to remember, okay, I talked to this person, this is what they said about that, and being able to link that. And I mean, it takes some practice just to get the hand motions down and everything, and just like any tool.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do, you could jump around really quickly. You can make these notes, and you could just keep building this stuff up, right? Keep building.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, yeah, right here. Can you bring back that chart? So,
Yeah,
how do you work with this information? Like when you're looking at this chart, what's your mind doing? What are you getting out of it? And how are you using that information?
That's a good question. I literally just found out about this functionality 30 minutes ago. Like while I was doing, I hit a keystroke. I was like, oh, there's a graph functionality. And I did that. So I don't know. What I suspect is it would be usable. It would be extra usable in analyzing clusters. So like we had this meeting and I built this up so I mean, I'll make that note right in here. How is this actually usable, right?
Right.
I suspect this is going to be very useful for reviewing specific events, a day, something like that. Now, it might take a little bit of work, and I'm sure if you go with the tools, with the other tools in there, you could do something like graph, do an org graph, but really consider only the notes that have been modified in the last 24 hours, right? That would be really nice for like a day in review. You could look at it and you can see, okay, this is where I spend the time on. This is okay. There's a lot of stuff flowing into. Let's see. Okay, what is there a lot of stuff flowing into? What's me? Okay, people. All right. Oh, reusable code. There's a lot of stuff flowing into there. So that's clearly been a big theme. I know that like eventually you could do stuff like having like a little graph query language, a little heads up display. They'll just give you like what are the big themes about what you're talking about. Stuff like that I could imagine being very useful. Again, I haven't even looked at what like stuff like Rome Research does. But how would that not be cool, right?
Interesting.
It's really good way of getting theme instructions, figuring out where you need to spend more time, and so on. But yeah, I don't know, but it does demo really well, and I only just found out about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of some usages. For example, one practice that I've been following over the last many years is when I give talks, I like recording it and then going back to it specifically to see where people asked questions, in which part of the presentation people asked questions, to then make me wonder, okay, should I add that as part of my visual contents or as part of my storytelling? When folks at the end of the talk, ask me questions, then it makes me think, well, they asked that at the end. Should I bring that somewhere in the middle of the talk so that next time that's not going to be a question, people are going to have different questions, and then, keep evolving my content based on that. And then maybe if like during a talk, we end up going into different tangents because of the questions asked, like what kind of tangents, so that I can like have some extra content in my back pocket that if in a future presentation people go down that same route, I have something to bring up, wrap it up, and keep on going. So this is just something that came to mind as I saw that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, like you can see I'm going in, adding more stuff even as you're talking, and it's fast to do. There is something going on where my particular version of Emacs isn't updating instantaneously, but mostly it does. Yeah.
Another use that I can think for it is like when I'm sitting in, say, sprint plannings or backlog refinement sessions and people are talking and asking questions and putting down considerations. This would be a good tool see at the end of the meeting, oh, people talked a lot about this thing and that other thing. So
That's
just,
exactly true.
yeah.
Another thing that can be useful, again, at this point, you're talking about specifically Emacs land, but Oregon Emacs has something called org capture, where you can basically highlight some code, browsing some code, you could highlight it, and then you set up so you do like a let's see, what is my command? The AOC, yeah. And you set up these templates, and if I go ahead, I don't know if I have it set up right here. Right, it does that, it captures it, and it drops it into a buffer. It would put all the code right here that I highlighted. It would set up a link directly to that point in the file. I could have it insert exactly in a note. So on my work computer, I have like just a note for code analysis of a particular code base. So I'm just like, as I'm looking at code, I'm throwing it over there so I can take notes on it, links back directly to that code, and you could link by line number, by content, by text. And then like just, I can make notes about it. You could even make code executable. So like I could grab a piece of code like in Python, throw it over there, and then because it's org mode, I could be able to actually run it in an isolated like environment and see how it works. Yeah, so lots of pretty cool stuff you could do with that.
Yeah. I did.
Yeah.
Good thing.
Cool. So we're at time pretty much. I do need a run.
Yeah, same here. Need to prep for another meeting. This
Yeah.
was a great conversation, guys.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the weekend. Recharge for next week. Keep track of the things that you learn, your challenges and stuff, and share it with us next week. You all take care.